Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. The Prophet ﷺ was in Mecca for 13 years during his prophethood. And in that time, we're very familiar with the situation of the believers. They were oppressed, they were looked down upon, they were a very small minority, they were living a lifestyle very different than the rest of the population. And it's so important to appreciate this part of the Prophet ﷺ's life and the companions who were with them, because it really resembles our situation here in the West as American Muslims. You see, as American Muslims, our identity overlaps with the general American population in that we're American. We enjoy American culture. We do what Americans do. We watch sports. We have barbecues. We do this, a lot of the same things. But you have this other side of us, and that is our Islam, that doesn't always coincide with the beliefs or the practices or the lifestyles of our neighbors. Well, you find the same thing in the Meccan era. The Prophet ﷺ, the companions, shared an identity with the broader Quraysh, and that they were all Arabs who come from the same long lineage. But they also had that difference, the difference in terms of Islamic ethics and Islamic identity. And so let us look at the lesson here, or at least one of the lessons, and that is, how did the Prophet ﷺ build strong individuals during the Meccan era despite the challenges? And in our last video, we spoke about how to build a stable family in terms of husband and wife in the West. Now let's look at the other part of the family. How do we build healthy, strong children, a strong family in the West? And that is our relationship with our children. What we need to do are four things. The first is give space for our children to grow. They need space to grow. Everyone needs space to grow. Remember the new job that you got? Or when in your current employment, the first day or two or the first week in your employment, you needed space to grow, to learn. You were bound to make a mistake. Well, you're in a new environment. You're dealing with a lot of things. It's complex. And of course, you're going to make mistakes. But if your manager was just sitting there watching you like a hawk and criticizing you for every small mistake, know this, and it needs to be that way, and don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, are you going to stay in that job? You're not. Well, the same thing when it comes to raising our children. If the parents are overlooking them like hawks, watching them like hawks, and correcting them in every single small and big mistake that they make, what's going to happen to them? They need space to grow. And in our lives, in our world that we live in, with the spread of pornography, with the spread of drugs, with the spread of dating, right, and promiscuity, and all of these things that are very unethical in terms of Islam, if our child gets through the teenage years and the 20s without falling into any of these, that is a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah protect us, but our children are bound to look at something inappropriate every now and then. It's going to happen. They're bound to maybe do something that we don't want them to do. It's bound to happen. And we as parents need to learn when we should actually involve ourselves and interject and stop them, versus when we should turn a blind eye, pretend like we don't know what's going on, although we actually know what's going on. And so how can we do that? Well, if they make an occasional mistake, let it go. Let the child learn, him or herself. If that mistake becomes habitual, they're constantly doing it, then yeah, we need to step in. Or that mistake is very life-changing, life-altering, like getting into drugs. We have to do something about it. But our children need space to grow. And look at the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. Have you ever wondered when his brothers, after putting him in the dry well and going back to their father and saying, "Oh, our father, a wolf came and ate Yusuf alayhi salam, and here's his shirt and here's the blood, this is evidence," Yaqub alayhi salam had a pretty mild reaction to that. He said, "Bal sawwalat lakum anfusukum amran fasabrun jamil." Rather, there's something fishy going on here. He knows what's going on, alayhi salam. He knows his children are guilty of doing something. And he doesn't really have a very strong reaction. Very mild. Why? He's turning a blind eye. He's giving space for his children to learn, to grow, if he was there and punished them and they deserved to be punished, what would have been the end result? 40 years later, these young men repented to Allah. And some scholars even said that they became prophets after that, after repenting. If Yaqub alayhi salam didn't give them space to grow, would that be the result? Give your children space to grow. Number 2 is having conversations with our children in terms of the differences between Muslim and non-Muslim. Where do we overlap? Because there are some shared principles, some shared ethics. Americans are very in line with, they like charity. And so you always go to grocery stores, would you like to give $1 for this cause? Would you like to give $5 for that cause? There's a lot of philanthropy going on in America, and people love that. And so we have a shared value between Muslims and non-Muslims in this country, that is charity. And I'm sure there are other values. But there are some things we know don't line up. When it comes to sexuality, when it comes to gender relationships, when it comes to this idea of gender fluidity, among other things. Islam has a red line there. And we need to have a conversation. What some parents do is, when their child asks about these things, they say, no, that's haram, we can't talk about this, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. That's not the best way of raising our children here in the West. It's not going to give them the tools to deal with these issues, and eventually, sooner or later, they're going to deal with it. Look, whether you send your child to a Muslim Islamic school or a public school, they're going to hear about pornography. They're going to hear about, parts of the other gender. They're going to hear about actions and behaviors. Isn't it better for you as the parent to be the first one to talk to them about these things, so that when they hear about it in school, they already know what it is and what to react and how to react, that, oh wait, this isn't in line with our principles? Of course it is. And also, we believe as Muslims that Islam is strong. It's victorious. Islam has the ability to challenge these things and to overcome them. So why not give our children the tools to be able to deal with that, instead of ignoring it and pretending like it's not there? If they ask about, well, what's that cross? Talk to them about what the cross is and why we disagree with the theology of Christians, for example. When they see two individuals holding hands, let's say they see two women or two men holding hands in a way that suggests some sort of sexual behavior, talk to them about it. Say, you see that? We don't agree with that. And so talking to your children, telling them this is what it means to be a Muslim, this is how we're different from our non-Muslim neighbors. The third thing that we need to do is instill Iman. Iman is strength. Iman gives power to the individual. Iman gives the person the ability to navigate life, no matter where they are. Iman is what protects the individual. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the people He gives Iman to, that He gives them nur, light, and they walk with that light, they know where to go. So if you want your children to be safe in a very interesting and a very complex world that we live in, that's full of challenges and problems, Iman is what's going to help them. They're not going to be under your supervision every single day of their life. They're not. And so we need to provide them with something that will always be with them, and that is Iman. Teach them Iman. Focus on Iman. Build their Iman. And last but definitely not least, the fourth thing that we need to do is resolve problems ASAP. As soon as we see a problem, we need to resolve it ASAP. For example, you suspect that your child is being bullied. Or let me put it this way. You see that your child, his or her personality is changing. They seem down all the time. They no longer like doing the things that they used to like doing. They're doing worse in school. That's a sign that there's something happening. What it is, well, we don't know. We need to figure it out. And so getting on top of that immediately, before it grows like a cavity in a tooth, and then the tooth needs to get a root canal, or maybe even extracted. We don't want that to happen. You see a problem, resolve it immediately. And this also includes characteristics in your child. You see that your child is a very stubborn person. You see that your child has a very short temper, and they get angry over things that they shouldn't be getting angry about. And that needs to be resolved. And by the way, resolving character problems takes from 6 to 12 months. It takes time. And focusing on each one by one, so that by the time your child becomes an adult, they're a very strong individual. And so we live in an interesting time with a lot of challenges. There's a lot around us that doesn't fall into what we believe as Muslims, and there's a lot of things going on that erode the family unit, that make the family weaker, that takes the family apart, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But we have the tools. We have the life of the Prophet ﷺ that can help us build a stable family here in the West despite the challenges. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.